This is Out of the Box podcast. I'm your host, Jim Andre, and my co-host, Bradley Powers. How you doing, Bradley? I can't hear you, Bradley.
Is that better now, Jim?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah.
Okay. It's a new year, and the new year, my New Year's resolution is change. Change can be a good thing, I believe. And today we're changing our theme a little bit. Still esoteric, by the way. We'll be discussing 911 conspiracy theories. And Jim Andre has a video prepared for us to watch. Okay. And for us to absorb the information, and then we can actually correspond with the chat forum and discuss with each other
Yeah, so
the
we'll show
911 conspiracy theories.
Yeah, so we'll present the video first, and then we'll elaborate on it afterwards. One thing I'd like to say before we show the video is that you notice that when the government questions the citizens, it's considered an investigation. But when the citizens turn around and begin questioning the government, they twist it around and call it a conspiracy theory. Let me see if I can get that video up.
I'm a licensed professional structural engineer with 37 years of experience in the structural field.
I'm a structural engineer with over 40 years experience in engineering.
Licensed architect in the state of New York for 25 years.
I'm a licensed fire protection engineer.
I'm a mechanical engineer.
Licensed fire protection engineer.
I have a bachelor's in metallurgical engineering.
I have a master's and PhD in chemical engineering.
I have a master's degree in civil and structural engineering.
I have a master's of science degree in civil engineering.
I have a bachelor's degree in physics, master's in education, another master's in mathematics.
I was a Green Beret for 6 years. I was trained in the use of demolitions.
I worked for Controlled Demolition Incorporated, CDI, the top-rated explosive demolition firm in the world.
I have published close to 60 peer-reviewed papers. My PhD is in aeronautics and nuclear engineering from Caltech. I did my postdoctoral work at the von Karman Institute in Brussels, Belgium, in finite element analysis. I taught at 5 colleges and universities, serving as department head and assistant dean.
I've been teaching science for many years, since I was about 16.
I
have published, I don't know how many papers, but certainly over 100, probably closer to 200.
I knew from day one that this was a controlled event.
The conclusion of explosives is definitive.
The only thing that I can see that would be capable of doing this would be explosive devices.
I certainly believe that it had to have been controlled demolition.
There was just no logical explanation for that building to come down, straight down into the path of greatest resistance in a little less than 10 seconds. Did not make sense.
It cannot happen that when you have asymmetric damage, you will get a perfectly symmetrical collapse.
There are columns of steel around the exterior of the building and within the core, all of which are there to prevent the thing from falling down. And so even if something falls on it, it's not going to immediately just go pop, 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 pop like that, floor by floor. If it's going to collapse, it's going to have to take some time to weaken this.
I'm a licensed professional structural engineer with 37 years of experience in the structural field.
I'm a structural engineer with over.
I'm a licensed professional structural engineer with 37 years of experience in the structural field.
I'm a structural engineer with over 40 years experience in engineering.
Licensed architect in the state of New York for 25 years.
I'm a licensed fire protection engineer.
I'm a mechanical engineer. Licensed fire protection engineer.
I have a bachelor's in metallurgical engineering.
I have a master's and PhD in chemical engineering.
I have a master's degree in civil and structural engineering.
I have a master's of science degree in civil engineering.
I have a bachelor's degree in physics, master's in education.
Yeah, I finally got it.
Mathematics.
I was a Green Beret for 6 years. I was trained in the use of demolitions.
I worked for Control Demolition Incorporated, CDI, the top-rated explosives demolition firm in the world.
I have published close to 60 peer
of greatest resistance in a little less than 10 seconds. Did not make sense.
It cannot happen that when you have asymmetric damage, you will get a perfectly symmetrical collapse.
There are columns of steel around the exterior of the building and within the core, all of which are there to prevent the thing from falling down. And so even if something falls on it, it's not going to immediately just go pop, 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 pop like that, floor by floor. It's going to, if it's going to collapse, it's going to have to take some time to weaken the structure below it.
You're looking for a jolt, that this thing, if it actually comes down and hit, you should be able to see the point at which they actually impact, because it would actually slow down the motion of the falling block. It never slows down. It accelerates the entire time.
Buildings actually accelerated as they came down, meaning they were not getting resistance from these massive columns in the center of the core of this building. Core of this building was very heavy. They're huge columns, huge.
Less than 1.5% of the steel that NIST actually got showed that it experienced any temperatures where steel would actually lose strength. 98.5% of the steel they got showed it would not lose, had not experienced temperatures where it would lose any strength at all.
The fires were not that hot. If you look at the NIST zone data, you can see this.
This violates the laws of physics. It can't happen. Those aircraft and those fires could not cause those buildings to come down in that way.
The buildings came down because there was very carefully controlled demolition with high explosives that had been planted many weeks, if not months before.
We have been told nothing but lies about this, folks. The government has lied to us, and we need to get to the truth.
Over the past 2 decades, thousands of architects, engineers, scientists, and other experts led by Richard Gage, they have put their reputations and their careers on the line, claiming that 9/11 was, in fact, an inside job.
I represent 3,000 architects and engineers across the country and around the world who are demanding a new investigation.
Now, of course, the incredulous retorts to anybody that questions the official story of 9/11 is that the government already conducted a meticulous official investigation into all of this. But according to the lead investigators of the official 9/11 Commission, that's simply not true.
Lee and I write in our book that we think the commission in many ways was set up to fail because we had not enough money.
No audio, Jim.
Put this into perspective, the 9/11 Commission was granted a pathetic $15 million to investigate what is considered to be the greatest crime in United States history, in which almost 3,000 were killed. Now compare that to the $25 million that was spent on the Mueller investigation, the $60 million spent on the Whitewater investigation, or the $400 million that was spent on the Space Shuttle Columbia investigation, in which only 7 people died. But there wasn't just a lack of money to conduct a proper investigation, guys. There was also an obvious cover-up.
We pressed early on for a full-scale investigation, and of course, one of the issues was while we were doing that, the evidence from the buildings was being destroyed.
Everything was scooped up, and all of a sudden they had a big incentive to recycle steel for some reason.
All of the evidence was removed. You can't do science without evidence. This is not only unscientific, it's illegal.
National Fire Protection Association Guide number 921 calls for saving the evidence and being prepared to justify why you wouldn't. It also calls for testing for accelerants and explosives when high-order damage is involved. And this did not do this.
And it wasn't just the criminal destruction of forensic evidence either. They also censored and suppressed key eyewitness testimony.
You heard explosions. Boom! It's like a distinct sound. It's not like when it's compression, like boom, 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 boom. Floors that were dropping and collapsing. This was boom, like you felt a rumble in the ground, like almost like you wanted to grab onto something.
Big explosion. Blew us back into the 8th floor.
Floor by floor. It was just
from the corner, boom, 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 boom. Just like 20 straight hits. And as the bombs were going, people just started running. And I sat there and watched a few of them explode.
The bomb hit the lobby first, and a couple of seconds in the first plane hit.
Think a bomb went off the lobby first, then a plane hit the button.
Most notable amongst this testimony was former World Trade Center employee William Rodriguez, who claimed that he heard an explosion from below in the basement before any plane even hit.
Boom! An explosion so hard that pushed us upwards. Upwards. And at that moment, I thought it was the mechanical room where they have all the pumps and the generators for the building, that maybe a generator just blew up on the basement. Now, 20 years in the building, you know something that comes from the bottom and something that comes from the top. And when I went to verbalize that it was a generator, we hear boom, all the way on the top, the impact of the plane on the top. I was a janitor. Like I said, on that day, there was an explosion on the basement, and this is prior to the building got hit by the plane. And then the plane hit, and then there was a series of explosions afterwards. I was one of the persons that testified for the 9/11 Commission, and my testimony doesn't appear on the final report. I testified behind closed doors. They didn't want me to do the testimony in an open hearing. Everything else, everybody else, open hearings. You saw the hearings. The final report shows up. What a surprise. My whole testimony was omitted. It doesn't appear.
But what's even more significant than the destruction of forensic evidence that could potentially prove the use of explosives, or the censorship of key eyewitness testimony of explosives, guys, is the fact that numerous independent scientists have since been able to study dust samples from the wreckage at 9/11, and what they have consistently found is high explosive thermetic materials.
In the dust, we found what we characterize as unreacted thermetic material, which cannot be accounted for by any other explanation, any other process going on than this was deliberately put in the towers for the purpose of bringing them down.
Now, of course, there are always going to be people who will cynically claim that in spite of their impressive credentials, these scientists are manipulating the research. But their primary study, which has been peer-reviewed and subsequently published in a science journal, has never officially been refuted, guys. And then in addition to that, these materials are so sophisticated and costly to make that they cannot be so easily reproduced.
This wasn't some guys working in caves in Afghanistan, or it wasn't, somebody in their basement doing this. This was, a massive engineering operation that made these materials.
But that actual scientific research just scratches the surface of what this group of experts have done to elucidate the truth. In fact, more recently, and this is huge, Professor Leroy Halsey of the University of Alaska Fairbanks, he and his team conducted a meticulous 4-year study into the collapse of Building 7, in which they conclude fire did not cause the collapse of World Trade Center 7. Instead, the collapse was due to a global failure involving the near simultaneous failure of every column in the building. And the only explanation for that, boys and girls, is controlled demolition. Now, as a result of this game-changing study, this group of experts, along with actual family members of 9/11 victims, they've come forward and are now suing the government.
So what do you want? Let's get to the bottom line.
I want truth. I've been lied to. I'm a parent who has an obligation to find out why my son was murdered.
We are not crazy. We have questions. We demand answers.
So anyway, that was a video. Sorry for the audio problems there. We had a little technical difficulties there, but you get the gist of it. So what's your opinion on that, Bradley?
The Americans did that to themselves. They wiped trillions of dollars of debt off the country because by demolishing the towers, the debt was demolished with it because there was no evidence or paperwork to prove that they owed trillions. The country owed trillions of dollars in debt, and also Sorry, Jim.
Yeah, it was reported that there was $2.3 trillion missing from the Pentagon the day before.
Also, the man who owned both the towers a few weeks earlier got out a new insurance policy for the towers. However, he didn't get the full amount that he was asking for. He got 2/3 of it. They also found I don't think they found any evidence of plane, but they found terrorist passports in the demolition.
Yeah, all them steel beams, most of them steel beams were like pulverized like into a powder, right? But yet the passport of one of the terrorists survived in all that rubble. Does that make any sense?
And also, like the Pentagon, the airspace is covered for 5 miles. You can't get into the airspace of the Pentagon for 5 miles without being detected. You know?
Yeah, well, with the Pentagon there. Now when this tragic incident took place, right? The news media kept playing the planes, recording the planes over and over again, hitting the buildings for about like 24 hours, which in my opinion is disrespectful, to the families of the members that were involved in this tragic event. But anyway, the Pentagon itself is one of the most secure airspaces in the world, right? Number one, how would a plane get through that secure airspace to hit the Pentagon to begin with? Number two, there's hundreds of video surveillance cameras around the Pentagon. Now, they showed the planes hitting the Twin Towers over and over again for 24 hours on the news media, but they can't produce one surveillance video from the Pentagon showing a plane hitting the Pentagon. You know why? Because the plane didn't hit the Pentagon. It was a projectile.
Okay.
And when the Pentagon got the damage on the Pentagon, the news footage, I don't recall anything that resembled an airplane in the debris. There's no tail section, fuselage, wing, engine, nothing.
Nothing. That's right. Absolutely nothing. Yeah. And also, it collapsed like a demolition would collapse a block of flats, or a building made of iron girders, by the way. In the war, 1945, a massive bomber hit a tower block a tower made of iron girders, and what happened was it wiped out the whole floor, yet the structure of the building remained intact. It only wiped out the floor, and that was a bomber, by the way, during the war. Do you know about that, Jim?
What's that?
The bomber in the war, Jim. Are you familiar with the story of the bomber that hit a tower and wiped out the whole floor completely? However, the building remained intact.
Yeah, well, I know one time the Empire State Building years ago got hit by a plane, which is a high-rise tower, and the building didn't collapse.
I think, Jim, that's the story I'm referring to. The Empire State Building got hit by a bomber and it didn't collapse. One guy from Facebook user saying Trump was in on it. What do you think about that, Jim?
Well, that I don't know, but Morgan Roundtree says her brother was at the Pentagon on 9/11.
Wow.
A
Facebook user says hologram plane, Jim.
Morgan says he said it was like a literal dream explosion.
Facebook user says hologram plane, Jim, and also says Trump promised the missing pages.
Vicky is asking whose projectile do you suspect was used for the Pentagon, Jim Andre? Well, whoever was behind the whole, setup, I guess. I don't believe it was terrorists.
No, that's right. And don't you think it's quite odd? Bin Laden, a terrorist, had a sea burial, a naval sea burial at sea, where no one could see his face of the body that went into the water. That's quite odd for an Arab, isn't it?
And if we believe that one, they'll tell us another one. Earl Fields says all the videos I've watched, you can hear the explosion as it went down, boom, 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 which is true. And that's akin to a controlled demolition. Morgan says her brother was a retired Air Force. He's retired Air Force and was working for Homeland Security at the time. Well, I'm glad he made it out of there okay, in any event. Midnight Rider says the plane was a hologram. There is an excellent video showing that fact. Yes, I did see that video, now that you mentioned that, Midnight Rider. Facebook user says, I have a cousin who lives in Pennsylvania and 10 minutes from where the apparent fourth plane crashed, and used to tell me there was no debris from that apparent plane crashing. Yeah, and I believe that. I believe that, Vic. And, out of all this chaotic event, that fourth plane was supposedly headed to the White House. And that's the only plane that had the, quote, heroes on there. So that, the most precious target of all was saved, supposedly.
Yeah. A Facebook user says MK Ultra, Jim.
Yeah. Morgan Roundtree says same, that her brother got out safely. I'm very glad he did as well. He's now retired in Texas. That's good. So basically, this isn't citizens investigating their own government. It's a conspiracy theory, according to the government.
Yeah. And what makes it worse, Jim, which is obvious.
We're all conspiracists. Conspiracists. That's what we are. Yeah. Unbelievable.
Yeah. Yeah, and wasn't there a third building, Jim, that collapsed by itself? allegedly
I
hit by a
believe they,
plane,
yeah,
yet there's no evidence.
I believe they call it building number 7. That wasn't hit by any planes, and yet that collapsed in its own footprint like a controlled demolition. So what caused that? And that also was a government building. So that must have had some government records. That must have had some government records in there that they didn't want people to find out about or something. They destroyed that building as well.
Vicky's saying there was no plane debris during the crash.
No, not on the Pentagon, no.
Yeah. Morgan says I'm what they call a conspirator. Yeah.
Midnight Rider says Building 7 was brought down using controlled demolition, as it was brought down in its own footprint, as controlled demolitions are well documented to do. I agree 100%.
Well, we're putting in a crowd, Jim, that's for sure.
Earl Fields is asking, could it be the trillions of money that was missing? Well, that could be part of it, but another part of it was, if you notice, they could claim terrorism with an act like that, and they went ahead and invaded Iraq under false pretenses, stating that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction and ties to terrorists, which turned out not to be true at all.
What else has Iraq got that the Americans wanted? Black gold, and black gold is oil. Did you know, Jim, that oh God, who was the leader of the country of Iraq?
Saddam Hussein.
Saddam Hussein, he built a pipeline out of his own money, not the country's money, out of his own money. He funded a pipeline full of that pumped water to villages out in the desolate areas where there was nothing. He financed a pipeline for water, supplying villages with water for free. Saddam Hussein did that out of his own money. So even though he was a dictator, that was really kind of him to perform such a task.
Well, my personal opinion is the job of the United States isn't to police the world. What a man does in his own country is his own business.
Marianne Clark says, did you hear about the Florida mole? I can't say I did. Did you hear about that, Jim, being in Florida? The Florida mole?
The Florida mole? No, I'm not familiar with that.
Please enlighten us, if you wish, Marianne Clark. Marianne Clark appearing on the show on Thursday, by the way, everyone, from Ghost House Paranormal. Just thought I'd share that with you. Do you know it was the 911 was 20 years ago, Jim?
Yep. Time flies. Vic says I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I prefer to be referred to as a BS analyzer. Earl Fields says I've been saying for a lifetime America needs to stay out of people's business.
I've heard it said that the American military are the terrorists of the world.
Well, that's the problem today. That's what we're going up against, is the military industrial complex, and that's what Eisenhower warned us years ago about.
Vicky's saying the Florida Mall incident is another psyop with blue beam being used as well. Says a blue beam was used in the mall incident. And Midnight Rider says, I don't know if you want to read that.
Yeah, however, the alleged plane that hit the Pentagon, GOA, was actually a missile. As the one video that was being withheld for so long from a business across the road that caught the footage was released. I did see that video. I believe that video was on the internet at one time. And that's exactly what it shows as a projectile flying into the building between two light posts and the building blowing up. Now, obviously, if that was a plane, the light poles would have been knocked down by the wings. And after the explosion, the light poles were still standing there.
Marion Clark says thousands of cops showed up at the mall in Florida, Miami. There was about 12 kids fighting with sticks, and there are rumors of alien sightings. That's regarding the Florida Mall.
Oh, the Florida Mall. I thought you were saying the Florida mold. Yeah, the Florida Mall.
Sorry, my English accent.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. Yeah, that was in Miami.
I remember we used to get a show from Miami called Miami Vice. Do you remember that, Jim?
Miami Vice, yeah. Yeah, I remember that show. Well, something definitely went down at the Miami Mall there, but I don't know exactly what. They're saying it was extraterrestrial related, so I don't know.
That's what Marion Clark says. Yeah, so like Jim McFarland says that he believes there were bombs set in those towers. James Blake says he agrees. James Blake says St. Peter, Florida, was shutting down buses and malls. I was stuck on one for an hour. So you can relate to that, what happened at the Florida Mall. You know.
Yeah, see, I don't get all the comments. I don't even see that comment.
I've got some different. I've got more devices, more forums.
Yeah.
And we're attracting a crowd, so that's very good. Well done on posting that video, Jim.
Yeah. And that's testimony from engineers, you know. And that's testimony from engineers, you know, experts. So they should know what they're talking about.
That's right. Facts, yeah.
Morgan Roundtree says
they leaked. Sorry.
Morgan Roundtree says she lost sound again on my end. Can't hear. Must be me. I hope everybody else is hearing us all right.
Terrorist American the military linked this disaster to the Islamic extremist group Al Qaeda, founded by Osama bin Laden.
Yeah, well, yeah, they're blaming it on the terrorists. Midnight Rider says his apology, the Pentagon, GAO, Government Accounting Office. That's what was struck and destroyed. And that's probably where all the records were to trace that $2.3 trillion loss.
Allegedly, the passengers and crew of the fourth plane fought back, and the plane was downed in a field near Shanksville in Pennsylvania. So the fourth plane didn't do any damage.
Yeah, it just landed. It just crash landed. Yeah.
3,000 people were killed in the 9/11 terrorist attack, including 19 Al Qaeda terrorists on September 11th. And the administration of President George W. Bush responded by declaring a war on terrorism.
That's exactly
against
right.
the creation of the Department of Homeland Security and the invasion of Afghanistan.
Yeah.
The American Airlines Boeing 767 was loaded with 20,000 gallons of jet fuel when it crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center in New York City.
Yeah, well, that's what they want. That's what they like you to believe. Yeah, but I don't know.
The impact left a gaping, burning hole near the 80th floor of the 110-story skyscraper, instantly killing hundreds of people and trapping hundreds more in the higher floors.
Well, do you know that the George W. Bush family and the Bin Laden family were partners in the oil business? Okay, and Bin Laden's relatives used to live here in the U.S. I drove a motor coach between Boston and New Bedford for the commuter run when I was living in Massachusetts, right? And Bin Laden's brother used to live in the Boston area, and he donated millions of dollars to the Big Dig project, which is a big project, construction project, you know, going right through the heart of Boston at the time. And when this incident occurred, what did George W. Bush do? He grounded all flights worldwide, right? Not worldwide, but I mean countrywide, or whatever he did. But he allowed the relatives of the terrorists to fly out of the country. Now, if that was true and they were part of a terrorist clan, wouldn't you think that he would keep them here instead of allowing them to fly out? What is he allowing them to fly out for? Their own safety?
Absolutely. James Blake said, yes, this country doesn't know enough to stay out of other countries' affairs. I believe there was the World Bank, owned by the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers. The World Bank wanted one in Iraq, and Iraq opposed it. And which Iraq's got one now.
Yeah, well,
any country that hasn't got a World Bank, America declares war on.
They own about 95% of the world banks, the Rothschilds.
Yeah. And the conspiracy theory regarding the Titanic, there was 3 chairpersons on the Titanic that were going to oppose the world banks in every country. And if they had arrived at the seating, they would have been able, their 3 opposals would have prevented the world banks from being built in other countries. However, the Titanic sank, went full speed ahead through a iceberg field and sank, and they never got to oppose it. Therefore, the World Trade Centers have manifested in every country virtually.
Yeah, they were going to oppose the Federal Reserve. And a lot of people don't even realize, see, it's called the Federal Reserve, but it's got nothing to do with the government. It's a private entity.
Yes, it was labelled, the Twin Towers demolition was labelled as a freak accident.
Yeah.
They broadcasted it as a freak accident. Then 18 minutes after the first plane hit, a second Boeing 767, United Airlines Flight 175 appeared out of the sky, turned sharply towards the Trade Center and sliced into the South Tower of the 60th floor.
Yep. So they like us to believe.
Marianne Clark says, Jim, Andre, can you guys set up a time for Tiffany and I to both be on Out of the Box podcast? Wow.
Yeah, we can do
well,
that.
we have to ask Tiffany, Marianne, if we can make this happen. That wouldn't be a problem.
we all got to get together and agree on a time frame to schedule it. That's not a problem. Midnight Rider says there was approximately 9 trillion missing from the Pentagon, and it was publicly unaccounted for the day before 9/11. Yep. I had heard it was 2.3 trillion, but it could have been 9 trillion. Facebook user says Rothschilds have done auction at Christie's. So Marianne's scheduled to come on January 18th, right, Bradley?
Yeah, I've just sent Marianne a message saying we will I'll contact Tiffany Reynolds tomorrow and see if I can get her on the show.
Yeah, see if she can appear at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I've sent Marianne Clark, I've sent Tiffany Reynolds a message now asking her, mentioning I have a request for her.
Tammy Bonham is asking, wasn't Donald Rumsfeld testifying on September 10, 2001 as to where that missing money went? And apparently Building 7 held a paper trail. Yeah, they were covering something up, no doubt. The truth will never come out, not when the government investigates itself.
Would the government investigate itself? There is a department that does that, allegedly.
Yeah, but you know how that goes. Influence, payoffs.
Yeah.
And why do they do it? Because they can.
Because they can. I'm just messaging Tiffany, Jim.
Morgan Roundtree says, seriously, though, I was a young new mom on 911. The event is the first time I truly started doubting our government's intentions. Midnight Rider says George Bush Sr. and Dick Cheney were two of the major orchestrators of that event. And yes, the Bush family and bin Laden family We're good acquaintances. Vic's asking if we heard of a class action which is currently before the courts, led by the fire chief's present at 911. I never heard about that. I don't know.
No, I haven't followed the demolition of the 911 towers ever since. Actually, well, like only like what's familiar, what's mainstream news.
Yeah, I'm sure they could bring a civil action suit. I don't know. I'm sure they could bring a civil action suit. I don't know how successful they'd be, but
the fire chiefs are the ones that could do that because the fire chiefs would recognise the demolition when they see it.
yeah, well, a lot of them first responders, you know, they got sick from all that debris and everything. So they should get compensated somehow. According to Vic, bin Laden was trained by the CIA. Barnum was saying, is there any proof been found that no Jewish people went to work that day? That I don't know. Yeah, we're living in a
Vic said, sorry.
We're living in a crazy world, that's for sure.
Vic says that bin Laden was trained by the CIA.
Yeah, I just addressed that a couple of minutes ago.
Sorry, so I'm
That's
multitasking here.
Lisa Thomas is asking who was the new owner of the towers just a few days before. Got insurance on it. Tammy Bonham says, you could get a hold of those who perished, you might explain it. So they probably don't even know what hit them.
To be honest with you, I thought they'd put more thought into something like that, demolishing the towers in that way. Cause imagine like the talk that must have gone on days before this event happened.
Yeah, Midnight Rider says, yes, it was Donald Rumsfeld, was the government official who publicly announced they had no idea where the trillions of dollars had gone from the Pentagon government accounting office.
The reason why they're saying that the Al Qaeda terrorist organization were responsible for this is they were allegedly acting as Osama the fugitive Osama bin Laden. They were acting in retaliation because of America's support for Israel and its involvement in the Persian Gulf War and its continued military presence in the Middle East is what spurred this reaction to demolish the towers, allegedly. Yes, Marion Clark says, can I see? Sorry, Jim.
Go ahead, Bradley.
Marianne Clark says, Bradley, can you see my comments? Yes, you can. I can, Marianne. I've contacted Tiffany and I told her that you would love to have her on the show, and I'm waiting for a response. And also, Marianne Clark says, at the mall, supposedly, there was a large grey figure about 8 to 10 feet tall. That's what she says.
Yeah, it was supposed to be extraterrestrial related.
I don't know what
event.
you know about the.
Yeah, it was supposed to be an
Yes,
extraterrestrial.
I don't know what you know about it, Jim. I know nothing about it. Okay.
But no matter what it is, they always cover up the truth anyway, so who knows?
Yeah, listen to this, Jim. Where did the 911 planes take off from? Well, 19 terrorists managed to smuggle box cutters and knives through security at 3 East Coast airports: Logan International Airport in Boston, Dulles International Airport in Washington, D.C., and Newark International Airport in New Jersey. They all managed to smuggle those tools, box cutters and knives, through security, Jim. Don't you think that's astonishing?
Tammy brings up a good point here. She says they tested the strength of the building a few years before 9/11. You remember the bombing in the parking structure? That's when there was a bomb planted down in the basement in the parking area. And she also goes on to say they never found any debris from a plane from that flight that crashed in a field.
And they're saying that 125 military personnel and civilians were killed in the Pentagon, along with all 64 people aboard the airliner.
Yeah.
That's what they're saying, Jim.
Well, I just don't understand how one of the most secured airspaces in the world would allow a plane to even reach the Pentagon to crash into it in the first place. So you know it's all BS. That within itself shows it's all bull. So
This is slightly off theme. Jim, Marion Clark says she loves the hats, guys.
Oh yeah.
Thank you, Marion. Thank you. Well, we are coming to the end of the show, and we pulled in quite a lot of viewers. They have found this subject quite interesting, Jim. So we picked a winner here. Thank you for everyone contributing. Please, we've got 5 minutes left if you want to ask anything in particular.
Yeah. Getting to the top of the hour.
4 minutes. Thank you. That's a good idea, sharing a video, Jim. Maybe we could do that on some other shows. Share a video, like 5-10 minutes at the beginning of the show. Let's talk about it. That's pretty good. Right.
Yeah, it gives everybody a little bit of a rundown on what it's all about, you know.
Yeah.
Tammy's asking, can you guys come to do some research on somebody named Robin Bush, who was a cousin to George Bush, who worked for the military? See if you can dig anything up on that guy, Robin Bush. Well, we can do some research, see what we come up with.
Morgan Roundtree says, I'm just saying thank you. Keep talking about what everyone is thinking. That's what me and Jim do. And Tiffany Reynolds says, sure, she's willing to appear on the show with Marion Clark on Thursday.
Well, that's good. We'll schedule them both on the same show.
Okay, I'll add Tiffany's name to the group chat then. On Messenger.
And that's going to be on the 18th,
2.5
correct?
minutes. Yeah.
That's going to be on the 18th, correct, Bradley? Yeah.
18th of January, yes, Jim. I've just added Tiffany Reynolds to the group chat.
All right, so I guess we're just about at the top of the hour. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us and interacting. That's what we're here for.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Yeah, so we'll see you all in the next one.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your contribution. It's been a pleasure to have you near us.